My fellow Americans,
How much worse can it get?
I know how disappointed you feel because
The vast majority of the media has said nothing of substance.
this is painful, and it will be for a long time. But I want you to remember this.
the change only happens when ordinary people get involved.
It will not be a peaceful change.
To quote the great Leonard Cohen,
It will be a usurpation.
And to all who are watching this,
Democrats or Republicans,
Whether you are young or whether you're young at heart, I won't stop.
those who ignore these elemental existential facts are traitors, and the usurper will live in infamy.
may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Discourse. I'm your host, Brandon Sutton. And before we get started with our topics for tonight and me introducing my riffraff that I call my panel, I do want to remind you that currently the UK elections are going on and the Progressive Army is doing live coverage as hosted by Kurt Hackenback. Hackenback? Is it Hackenback?
It's Hackenbarth and Salah Marcos and Colin Moores.
Thank you.
It's Hackbarth, not Hacking.
Hackbarth.
Okay,
All right, so I got that
I'm
wrong.
bad with names. I was a bad teacher. I'm always bad with names. They're doing live UK coverage and breakdown, and it looks like Corbyn is overperforming. Turns out far left policies are popular. Can you believe that, guys? And by far left, I mean center left policies are popular.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you are more interested in that, please go over and check it out, or check it out in Aftermath. All I gotta say about that is go Corbyn. I look forward to reading tomorrow all of the navel-gazy, insular op-eds by people who were in charge of informing us about the way this was going down to go, I have no idea how this happened. We're going to have to really take a deep look at the way we predict things and stop just asking our friends. But let's not dawdle. It's not in yet. So to help me break down this week's set of events is my normal riffraff panel. Let's start with my producer, Richard. Richard, how you doing?
Doing good. Plugging away back here. Adair is expressing an emotion that I feel towards the software that I'm dealing with right now. Trying to be able to make sure I can get him on screen in a moment. I'm gonna do my best. So hopefully it cooperates, and we'll go from there.
Okay, we're having a few technical difficulties, but we'll be fine. Next up is my. Oh wait, you can't get Adair up on the screen. Okay, it's whatever. Next up is my white ally, my white slave. I'm sorry, it's not. John, say hi, John.
Hey, what's going on? Happy to be here. Apparently, I don't have a choice, though.
Yeah, no, you have a choice. It's just you can either go back to prison or be on the discourse.
Well, in that case, be on the discourse.
Okay. Exactly. That's what I thought you were going to say. And finally, Adair. Say hello, Adair.
Let's see, am I going to be on screen? I'm on screen. Hey, what's up, y'all? Thanks for joining us one more time. Let's go, Pins. Let's get up 3-2. We're going to win that cup.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm not gonna bear the lead. This week we found out Hillary Clinton, or the Clintons, when they were the governor and first lady of Arkansas, kind of sort of had slaves. Okay. I don't know how to say it any other way without being disingenuous, so I'm just gonna say they kind of had slaves. More specifically, they were using unpaid prison labor or barely paid prison labor to take care of the governor's mansion, cook, clean, etc., etc. During the late 80s? No, late 80s, right?
80s.
Or was it? Yep. Yes, during the 80s. The 1980s, in case you were wondering. In case you were confused. it would also technically, well, not illegal. It would, if it were the other kind of slavery, it would have been illegal in the 1880s too. Does anyone want to respond to that? Slavery's not funny. I'm not laughing because of the slaves.
Yeah.
You left out the vampirism.
No, we'll get to the blood harvest thing. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Trust me. It's on my to-do list.
That's really kind of creepy. Like, not even kind. Like, that's just really creepy, Brandon.
Well, I guess my biggest problem with all of it. My biggest problem with all of this is the people who are defending slavery online because it's attached to Hillary. Like, I get, I can't believe that we're this far into tribalism that they're literally saying, slavery is bad, and then following it up with a but and some sort of argument. It's just kind of like, no, slavery is bad. That's it. End of story. Like, the but her emails thing has turned into but her slaves, and it's kind of like,
perfectly honest about why I'm laughing. It's not funny. So I agree with John. There's two parts. I agree with John. There are two parts of that are problematic, right? And the first part is that under the 13th Amendment, with the amendment that abolished slavery. If you've seen the Ava DuVernay's documentary on Netflix, I definitely recommend reading. Watching it, and then also reading some supplementary material, specifically the books "Slavery by Another Name," and "Super Predator: How Bill Clinton Exploited the Black Community, etc." I think that's not the direct name, but you'll be able to find it if you search for Bill Clinton Super Predator. The fact that we still allow slaves under these very specific conditions, as long as they're criminals and not just black, and the responses to this discovery, which was discovered because it wasn't unearthed; it was in her book. It was in her. It was actually just in her autobiography
that no one read.
Go ahead, finish up, John.
That nobody read. Nobody read it until now. That's why no one found it till now.
That's the real takeaway. That it took this long to find out, right? No one got to page 21 of her autobiography, and if they did, it kind of just went in one eye out the other. Like, this was in the preface.
Yeah,
it started out like, I want to thank my editor, and also we had slaves.
I found it a curious tradition, but moving on.
But here's the thing though. Like, no one would have read that book that wasn't a diehard Hillary Clinton fan. And so we already know that Hillary Clinton people have this amazing ability to ignore everything that she does wrong. So much so that they are actually defending literal slavery. And Brandon might call it disingenuous. As far as I'm concerned, she owned slaves. Those slaves were inmates of the Department of Corrections of the state of Arkansas.
Least.
Therefore, those were hers.
Adair, you are being a disingenuous piece of shit. She rented those slaves in the state. This was the 1820s.
She pay rent. You can't rent something you don't pay rent on.
She fine. She
Arkansas taxpayers voted the bill, I guess.
Like an 1820s version of Rent-A-Center. I think Adair's being unfair because, for all I know, she didn't even have the option to buy. It's not like she was even paying an installment. It's like, we're professionals, so get it right. Get it right, Adair.
She owns slaves.
But so I
don't give a damn.
But this is the thing.
That's what it comes down to.
I'm being hyperbolic. I'm quibbling over the definition of own, when most people are quibbling over the definition of slave, right? I know John really has been keeping up with all the excuses online. You guys probably have, but I haven't really been. I kind of read the excerpts. I was like, okay, well, this is too much for me. I can't go into the defense space and see what they're saying. But another point of contention is whether or not they were actually slaves or not, whether this was real slavery, right? Or am I making that wrong?
No, that was pretty much one of their main defenses, was this wasn't actually slavery, and the prisoners would prefer to be at the governor's mansion than in their cell.
Yeah, probably.
Imagine that.
Awful.
Like, who would it? Like, why would you be like, yeah, no, I think I want to sit in this musty ass cell all day with this nigga that done killed 3 people.
That's a good point though, there, because that's an important point. Because we have to be honest, and we discussed this with Michael A. Woods Jr. Oh, shit, I did it again. Michael A. Wood Jr. on Tuesday, me and John, and you should definitely listen to that interview if you haven't heard it. It's on SoundCloud.com/expanded discourse. Like there's there's pretty much a guarantee that one of those slaves was innocent, right? We know that from groups like the Innocence Project, who goes out of their way to introduce DNA evidence to exonerate people in death row and in prison, specifically people of color. That there's pretty much a guarantee that one of the people were innocent, right? That they were not only unpaid laborers, but they were unjustly imprisoned. So, like, even if you can do the Olympic level, like Simone Biles mental gymnastics to justify keeping prisoners and unpaid laborers, these people were innocent. Some of them were probably.
Yeah, and all like there's a good case that I'll bring up later when we're talking about the Democratic Party at large. But go ahead, whoever's getting in there.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. There's absolutely zero chance that some of them were there's zero chance that at least one of I can't phrase it. Basically, yes, you're right. Some of them were innocent. I would actually wager a large number of them probably were innocent. Just because of the way the government, the way the system works, especially when you're in the South, and we all know what well, 3 of us on this panel have grown up with stories about what it's like to be black in the South, because that's just something that you hear about in the community, right? Like,
I didn't hear about slavery. My grandmother's not that old.
Like, this is what you expect. Like, I'm not surprised that governments in the South continue to use slave labor. I mean, we use slave labor in the entirety of the United States. I mean, it's not that big a shock. I just can't believe that well-meaning liberal, I'm not a racist white folks are like, well, she had slaves, but guys, Donald Trump did something wrong. So she must be much better.
Well, here's what I want to say to that, right? That's true. And for me, and I think maybe I'm the outlier on this, like, I don't care that much about Hillary Clinton. It's like, I don't think that she is like the source of all evil in the universe, right? I think that she brings out the worst in people sometimes. And I think that this is an example, like John said, of this extreme reactionary tribalism that Dems are defending, not only slavery, but prisons. And it not only has to do with, them defending Clinton as a person, and as this myth they built up in their heads, but this is also them defending the very idea of prison as an institution, right? This. We go back to the same thing where, these centrist people, conservative, they believe, well, not even conservative really, but let's keep it according off the liberals today. They believe in institutions. And the fact that these people were in prison speaks to whether or not they were innocent or guilty. And like the idea that, prison is awful, not by chance or because it's rehabilitative, but because it's designed to be that way and it's a money-making scheme. But that oftentimes people in prison aren't guilty of anything, or definitely don't deserve the punishment they're getting, is foreign to them. Like, we have to be punishing them, and if they're just and if this is a way for them to get out of jail, that's fine. Unpaid labor. Like, they had the choice. They can either be in prison or they could work, and they chose to get some job training. It's just like an internship. It's like working for Mother Jones. You just don't get.
I mean,
you're getting paid like exposure.
Yeah, exactly. I really don't even know what to say. I mean, like, it's so disheartening to see the way the discussion went this week, where it was like a whole mess of people just came out and said, "Holy shit, she had slaves," and then the typical people came right out of the woodwork to push back on it. It was almost like, the whole conversation that needs to be had as to whether or not we need to, abolish the practice of using prisoners as labor was completely ignored, and instead we got to Hillary-centric arguments about whether or not we need to defend I'm with her, rather than talk about the fact that, all of this, the practices, the prisons, the institutions, as you said, are not only flawed, but flawed by design and policy in a lot of ways. So
I'd say it got an equal treatment as it did in her book, in that while she was talking about the slaves at the governor's mansion, she neglected to mention any of the circumstances that might have put them there. Beyond that, it seemed that murderers actually seemed to be better behaved than the ones that were there for property crimes. That seemed to be the
as a learning
extent.
experience for herself. Like, she treated it as a learning experience for herself, right? Like,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. She treated this was a learning experience for her, and she centered herself in her. I mean, it's an autobiography, right? So I can't fault you for making it about yourself, obviously, but in context, it seems so problematic that these people are essentially slaves, and it really reads. It could, but for a few aspects of it, it sounds like it could be from the diary of a slave mistress from the 1860s. But for a few, it just replaced a few words here and there, and I don't mean that disingenuously, but you replace one or two words, criminal with slave, with black, and it sounds like the diary of a slave owner, or a slave owner's wife. And I think there's a lot to unpack here, and so I think this inability to identify what Clinton did or her thoughts in this piece as racist, it gives us insight into how we conceptualize racism in America, right? And how it's attached to this idea of the stupid racist, right? That racism is not a systemic, structural, or institutional problem, but it's a personal and intellectual failure on the parts of certain people, and usually it's intrinsic to certain groups, right? So Southerners, more or less, I think that Arkansas is a Southern type thing or a hick state is not really being conceptualized here. It's just it's treated as the personal intellectual failure of rednecks, as opposed to something that is within all of us to certain different degrees. But go ahead, John. I know you wanted something to say.
No, I don't actually. My catch Bernie is just going literally crazy behind me and attacking my legs.
Don't worry about it. Bernie's welcome.
I did want to bring up I guess now a little bit. I'll mention the story basically about Arkansas and kind of how it ties to the modern situation that we're facing now. So let me just get myself up there real quick. Basically, it starts with a person named Jerome Buckley, who's a black man who was sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison for selling $40 worth of crack to an informant in 1999, who was basically hired by the police in exchange for getting off for a theft charge if they caught this guy or some guy selling crack. And so they set that up, and the Jerome Buckley got his sentence reduced to 28-year sentences, but he ended up doing about 11 and a half years before finally, after petitions and a lawyer took up his case pro bono and several other things happened, 11 and a half years later, he finally got released because essentially they had withheld a video that showed that he was innocent of the crime, had not committed the crime. And the Democratic Attorney General at the time, Democratic Party Attorney General at the time, Dustin McDaniel, 2010, objected to him getting compensated for his time in prison and the suffering that he went through. So there was a panel that had awarded him $460,000. Despite McDaniel's objections, McDaniel took his objections to the legislative group that had final say, and they denied the $460,000 settlement. Why this matters is that when Hillary Clinton was in Arkansas campaigning, guess who was on stage behind her? No one other than the Democratic former Attorney General, Dustin McDaniel. And so, when we see how she interpreted the slavery that was happening at the governor's mansion, how she wrote about it in the 90s, and how it's being defended today, it fits right in with the Democratic Party, and we're supposed to accept it because this guy has got to be better than the Republican who wanted to keep him in prison despite finding out, that's what they're going to tell us.
That's the liberal grift, right?
Yeah.
Again, we go back to the same thing, whether you're talking about this particular judge or someone like Kissinger, right? Whose policies, whose foreign policy is undoubtedly racist. Yes, Mr. Brzezinski's father, whose name I can't pronounce. The first name I can't pronounce. I have a speech.
Just Z-Big. Just call him Z-Big.
Okay, is that his rap name?
Basically.
Okay. Z-Big. And that sounds like a bad mixtape rapper. And I'm going to talk. But anyway, what you call it? Z-Big. Their policies are undoubtedly racist, right? But we have a problem with American society understanding getting past the whitewashing and surface level language of these sorts of things. We get focused on
I mean, we compare them to the overt racism, or not even overt, of Jim Crow policies or slavery, and because it doesn't explicitly mention Black people, we don't understand that like these are being done with that interpretation in mind, right? We know they're going to be enforced that way, and again, like this idea of the stupid, ignorant redneck racist holds us back as a society from really engaging with how pervasive and ubiquitous racism is as an idea in all of our heads. Like the idea that only certain groups can be racist, that and that institutions are unbiased, that the law is unbiased, it's colorblind, and that when it isn't colorblind, it's due to the individual actions of individual actors, which are not indicative of structural problems. But which makes it hard to view Clinton's actions, and not just Clinton actions, but Jimmy Carter did this too. I don't want to just unfairly pick on Hillary Clinton. Jimmy Carter did this. I think they said Reagan did it as well. At some point, like this is not unique to Clinton, but when it comes to Clinton, the way people are engaging with this and their inability to just like, okay, this was a racist thing that she did. Like maybe it doesn't make her an awful person because
yes, it does.
I was trying to finish that.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, you were on that roll. You had a roll go, and then you said something dumb. So
I'm sorry, that was my bad. That's my bad. I was trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but no. But so therefore her actions can't be interpreted as racist. They're always interpreted through that non-racist lens, right? They're pragmatic. They're traditional. They're pragmatic as being a code word for non-ideological. But we know pragmatism is an ideology. But no, but please, like I do want to engage with her rationale for this. So Richard, tell her what she learned from this experience. Tell her what the takeaway from being a plantation owner was. I guess Richard's too busy. So did anyone else read the context, right? Because
I got you.
Basically, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go. Actually, you should go ahead. We talked about it.
No. I need you to do it because I will get through out laughing.
I don't know if I'll do any better, but essentially, and it's hard to actually give it any justice. But it boiled down to her experiencing, like she started to pontificate or endeavor in thinking about that perhaps that these people had ended up in the prison system due to a low emotional IQ. And that was kind of her takeaway from her experience is that, it's something. It's not that they're lacking something in their racial genetic makeup. It's that it had such a life that they experienced things that prevented them from developing a high enough emotional IQ to be able to suppress the urges to act out violently or in a rage and things to that effect. I mean, you can go on.
Racial defect.
Yeah, that's some old racist noise. But Adair, you go first, please.
Right.
I mean, like, just because I like how she tried to cover it in this veneer of, well, they just weren't emotionally intelligent enough to not know that beating somebody to death was something that gets you in jail. Allegedly, right? Like, it's literally the same kind of thing that it's the same racist narratives actually that we've heard since right after slavery ended. During slavery, blacks were docile. Not really. During slavery, we weren't violent. During slavery, we were docile, stupid, and needed white people to tell us what to do every day, every minute of every day. The moment slavery ended, the narrative changed, and someone's got siren. So damn. The narrative changed, and we were viewed as violent, irrational, stupid, raping, pillaging, angry, murderous beasts. Like that's, and so she in a way she combines the two narratives by saying we need white people to tell us what to do, because if they don't, then we're gonna go and murder all the white women. Like that's basically what she's saying. So I mean, it's just a lot of racist bullshit. And for anybody to try to defend it, I don't give a damn who it is. It could be Hillary Clinton. It could be Bernie fucking Sanders. It could be I don't know. Pick somebody, and it's still an issue. It's still slavery. It's still something that needs to be called what it is and addressed properly.
Right. Here's the thing. Even if you give it the veneer,
what did the white man have to think about this? Yeah. What do you think about slavery?
No. I want to get to her take on this.
Before you get to her take on it, I just want to get some context. So, like, the way she justified this is with the theory of emotional intelligence that comes from a book by a prominent psychologist named Goleman. So he is a psych. This is a real like psychology. But go ahead.
But that's exactly what I was going to say. One of the things that real psychology addresses is that like part of emotional intelligence material, a lack of materialism in their life in development, meaning like they were lacking in stimulus, or they were lacking in love, or they were lacking in certain things in the family, but they were also lacking in material conditions that would allow them to grow into fulfilled human beings. So what I find completely disingenuous is the fact that for the next 40 years, her policy completely did not address any materialism that might actually have, even if you were to take this to be like she's genuine in her analysis and this analysis is correct, she didn't do anything about it. Like the next governor was the one who came in and then turned around and said, all right, we're going to put outlaw the use of slaves in the house or in the governor's mansion. She didn't do anything.
The slaves. What a brave new world.
I guess we have to give some fairness. She wasn't the governor, she was the governor's wife.
She wasn't the governor. She was the governor's wife, and I think that's a fair thing that's a fair distinction to make. Like the impetus was on Bill Clinton to get rid of this program. It wasn't on her. From what I've heard, she didn't speak out against it.
Yeah, I haven't heard this was a point of contention or that it was like, hey, Bill, you really think it's a like if she had any reservations to the idea of having the slave labor, it was that she thought they might be dangerous, not that either that the slave labor was bad or that maybe they actually didn't even commit a crime in the first place. Neither of those thoughts were good, but that they might hurt her family. She did think about that.
And it definitely doesn't speak to it's definitely not, incongruous with any of her future positions or positions before it either. So I think that it fits very snugly into what people would critique about her. But you want to say something there?
Yeah, no, because I kind of want to push back against that idea that John said that if you grow up in an environment, what was it you said, John? Something like lacking.
What I was saying is,
material things.
Even if you take what she's saying, not only the position that she's saying is as legitimate, but also her defense of that position as her actual genuine feelings. Like she then didn't go on to do anything to change any of the material conditions of the people that would have been affected by this.
And I can understand that, but here's why I have an issue with using that as an excuse in the first place, right? So I'm someone who grew up in an abusive household. I'm someone who grew up in a violent neighborhood. I'm someone who grew up incredibly, incredibly poor. So based on Hillary Clinton's ideation, just those three factors alone should say that I am a violent human being who should be in prison because I murdered somebody. That's not necessarily the case. Yes, those things make it hard to have normal, healthy, functioning psychological relationships with being a normal, healthy, functioning person. Yes, we've all got issues. Absolutely. But I disagree that, us being, and the hidden language here is that Black people in these situations.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The hidden language is Black people in these situations become murderers. And so that is something that also has to be addressed, and that's a problem. So yes, the economic anxiety is like, she's hypocritical as fuck. We do have to agree. But to just talk to her defenders on that, it's patently false and it's disingenuous, and the proof is sitting right here talking to you on this show.
Right. I was just saying that her entire argument and a lot of the defense I'm seeing was based off of that, where you're coming from the position that she is correct, and also the science behind this is correct. It's even so, it's completely bunk. And then you add in the inherent racism to all of it on top of that, and it blows it up.
So here's what I was going to say.
We all know science never gets misapplied, though. So I'm sure.
Exactly. So I think it's tempting to say, this is pseudoscience, right? That Goldman is just pseudoscience, but it's not. It's just she's just misunderstanding it, right? It's this sort of I have this. She has a misunderstanding of, like John said, the ways in which structural and material conditions affect the emotional development of the human beings, basically. Like this is something that affects all human beings. And Adair said it even more eloquently prior to this, right? That this is the narrative that she's putting forth, that the low emotional intelligence in criminals that cause them to commit crimes, to be violent, to be et cetera, and that they need this yoke of the state, this yoke of working for sophisticated governorship or governor is. That's just slavery. Like that's just those are the same narratives that appeared under slavery. That Black people need the yoke of the slave owner and of Western society to civilize them, because there's something inherent about them that makes them savage. You know, that sort of weird. I forgot who wrote about this, but the idea of of the black male as a form of black males being succumbing to a form of lycanthropy.
Around white women on their period.
Not actually. I mean,
specifically what they said. That was specifically.
That's the plot. That's the plot to the movie Ginger Snaps.
Like joke about it. We joke about it. But again, I'm totally serious. That is actually something that white folks thought, especially right after slavery ended. That was considered scientific fact that black men could not control themselves around white women who were on their period, that we would rape them, and that because of that, black men needed to be cold and put in prisons or enslaved again.
I had a quick question about with the Hillary Clinton, all the inmates that were working, or her slaves, they were all black. Does Arkansas is 70% white? It had white murderers and white criminals, right? Like, how come there were no white, or were there white servants that just didn't get mentioned, or?
She just mentioned.
You ain't having a White House slave. What are you talking about?
That would be uncivilized. And
right?
I think this is where
a long tradition of black slaves at the governor's bench,
but her attention focuses on that. And so, of course, let's just So when we talk about this low emotional intelligence, right, this low empathy and all these other fanciful words, it's funny to me that the individual acts of violence, or not funny, I'm being churlish, that the individual acts of violence, interpersonal violence, because our book states these people were murderers out of usually interpersonal conflicts with other people over resources or some other situation. That's indicative of low emotional intelligence. But bombing 7 nations or advocating regime change, that's incredibly emotionally intelligent. It just comes down to again, similar narrative we're hearing about Trump, right? Trump's lack of sophistication, that he's bringing a lack of sophistication to the White House that is not due to the simple act of bombing the shit out of 7 of the poorest countries, not 7 of the poorest countries in the world, but at least one of the poorest countries in the world, with Yemen.
Yeah.
And Somalia. It's in Somalia. That's not indicative of low emotional intelligence, of chaos or lack of sophistication. It's not until the person doing it is tweeting really, really. Oh God, sorry, I had give me a bit of a headache just thinking about it.
The Iran statement.
Even I succumb a little bit I wish he'd stop tweeting. Yeah. I'm better than a no. Even I have that. No. I really wish he would just stop.
Because presumably, hopefully, there's going to be an America after he's done. So we would like to have as little of an embarrassment to live down and less radiation in the landscape. I think. I don't know.
You guys are gonna have to talk to your kids about the president who tweeted. That's gonna be a legit fucking thing. That's gonna be in school books. They're gonna.
I feel like you just might have written my first or titled my first children's novel, but go ahead.
No, there's gonna be essays written about his tweets. There are essays being written about his tweets right now. There are books being written about his tweets. There are books. There are not only pop books about Trump's best or worst tweets and implications, but there are academic studies being done by social linguists and theoretical linguists being done. There was recently that bot that was invented to translate Trump's tweets into actual presidential words, actual human language. And it's it's not unimportant. It's just we take the wrong things from it, right? That this is the metric for sophistication, that you don't tweet while you're bombing 7 countries. Right. That's the metric for sophistication. But if you bomb 8 countries, we know certain presidents would have that would have been fine. It wouldn't have been a lack of sophistication. It would be somehow pragmatic, right? It's not racist, it's pragmatic. And this idea that, should Clinton have risked her political career speaking out against slavery comes, back into this idea she made the political smart decision. She made the expedient decision, and it had nothing to do with her own personal feelings about race, but everything to do with everyone else's feelings about race. And the defense of this is just again, her keeping slaves in Arkansas. I'm not really so much bothered by that individual act as I am by the existence of the slaves in the first place and the defenses. Because theoretically, these are people who,
at least not surprised.
I don't know how Hillary Clinton feels about black people. Oh no, I do actually.
Yeah, yes we do. Yes we do.
I'm trying to be generous.
Why?
But I do know these. I'm a nice person.
No, you're not. Stop being nice. Be real. This is the discourse. We don't get nice on this show.
You're petty as fuck. Why all of a sudden are you trying to be like, oh, I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt? Like, what are you doing?
Listen, I don't know the Clinton part, but I do know that this is the most reactionary I've seen Democrats in the entire primary. And frankly, I don't know if I could have handled the primary season that included this information.
Yeah,
I think it'd have been too much for me. I think it would have been like, could you imagine? It's like Bernie Sanders and Mrs. Clinton.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, really the fact of the matter is this: what this does is it brings attention to something that most people didn't realize that was going on. I think a lot of us that have to deal with the prison industrial complex, be it because we're peoples of color, be it that we lived in certain areas where people just constantly cycled in and out of jail. Slave labor was something we realized was happening and something we realized was going on. Most of America has lived this idyllic fantasy that slavery was outlawed with the Emancipation Proclamation. Spoiler alert, it didn't free anybody. Continuing forward, they just had this idea that, okay, we had the Emancipation Proclamation, so that freed the slaves. No, it didn't. Civil rights happened, therefore racism is over. No, it's not. So for these folks, it kind of shatters that idea of what America is supposed to be about. It shatters that idea that America is an egalitarian society, that we don't base everything on race, that if you work hard and you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're going to be fine. It shatters that, and they cannot have that shattered. Hillary Clinton is such a perfect embodiment of American, of the ignorant American. Right? Like, she represents everything they hope they could be one day. She represents this idea of this monolithic government that it's not going to fail you, that everything they do is right. Her husband was nice. He just has dealt with a few bad things. And they get, and you mentioned it earlier, Brandon, it's not bombing 7 countries isn't a sign of low emotional IQ until you start tweeting, dumb things. And sure, Donald Trump tweets dumb things, but I would actually argue that it's the only reason why they see it as a lack of emotional intelligence, because the fact of the matter is he's what they would consider to be a classic racist. He, in their minds, is racist. Therefore, all of his actions must be racist. Hillary Clinton, in their minds, is not a racist. Therefore, she can do nothing racist.
So I would,
and that is, I think, a key distinction for them.
So I would not push back, but add the amendment that it's not that all of his actions are racist. It's just that you are allowed to attach racism to certain ones of his actions. That's
what they believe. They believe all of his actions are racist. All of his foreign policy is racist. They believe his economic policies are racist. And a lot of it is. A lot of it goes into systemic and structural racism. But they ascribe racism to everything he does.
Whereas
I wouldn't say everything. I would just say they're more willing to ascribe racism to some of the stuff that he does, because when he bombed Syria, or the pro regime forces, the pro regime forces.
That's fair.
And supposedly, the Syrian army, which is what they're normally called. So I mean, that's all I really had to say about the slavery thing. I do want to switch to talk a little bit about the Comey hearing, specifically the things that we missed while people were focusing on Comey, because I think that's important too. But we do need to talk a little bit about Comey.
Quickly on the slavery thing, I just wanted to mention that we all do generally have some sort of benefit from that labor. They clean our highways. We use the same type of labor. I know community colleges often use them to clean the grounds, and so we all benefit from it as a result. And so we all have a responsibility in it, I think. But I mean, I think we sufficiently dragged Hillary to exemplify how what she was doing is different than how the rest of us are participating in the system. But we can't neglect to mention it, I think. But we can move on from there.
I mean, the people dragging Hillary are doing it less because of Hillary and more because of her followers. I think that sans the Hillary, the Hillbots, or whatever you want to call them on Twitter, this would have been a non-issue, right? I think that sans them, because this is something to be used against them, not against her. It's she doesn't care.
Yeah, exactly.
But
it's about the people that are defending it and defending the institution and so on and so forth.
Yeah. It's not even the voters still. Because you can talk about the difference between the Bernie Sanders voters and the way they deal with his theoretically racist foreign policy too. Because his positions on Palestine, in Israeli occupation is
Syria,
it's indicative of global anti-blackness, global anti-brownness. In some part, there is a global black race or whatever. But in the people who are still with Bernie, most of them, I would say, are that's very problematic for him to do. Like that's the difference between like people who support Bernie and some of the people who support Hillary in the strongest way. It's like, well, they're willing to engage for his faults in good faith. And I mean, just to end this conversation and move on to Comey, I would say Adair's right. Adair's right. People who are laboring under the delusion that we're getting better racially or gender-wise as a society, they point to like specific watershed moments, like the Emancipation Proclamation, the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, Obama becoming president as the days in which racism ended. Then they find out information like this and it like destroys their mind a little bit because like, they'd already filed, they'd already put us into post-racial America, and except for little pockets, or rather, their pockets of America are real America and it's post-racial. But again, so I want to move on to Comey. Do you have any last thoughts on slavery? Do we want to emancipate this conversation?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, and if you don't know, I don't know how you don't know, but you're gonna know. You're gonna learn tonight. Today, Comey testified in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee about his firing and an investigation into Trump, or sorry, not into Trump. Why don't you break it down for us, John? I know you were following it much more closely than I was. I watched the hearing, but you were really mired in it.
Well, he went before Senate Intelligence Committee in a public hearing, and they asked him a bunch of questions. And, it was typical that the Republicans tried to frame it one way with their questions, while the Democrats tried to frame it another way with his questions. Ultimately, there were people on both sides who were trying to get to the intelligence hearing, was trying to get to an obstruction charge. And honestly, I don't think they got there. One of the my biggest takeaway of this whole thing that we didn't already know, my biggest takeaway from this was that Senator John McCain's brains are made of Swiss cheese and he should be put in a lawn chair somewhere with pudding, because the section that he did was just a drooling ramble about nothing, where he was trying to make an equivalency between the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails and the investigation into Trump campaign collusion with Russia.
He was up all night watching tentacle porn. I mean, tentacle hentai.
Yeah. Well, actually, he said he was up all night watching the Diamondbacks game. So I don't know. But one thing I did see was that, Comey basically said he detailed into his statement that he actually printed out the day before and gave to the news media the day before, saying that there were 9 meetings, 2 that were in person and then a bunch of phone calls. And the 2 that were in person were just solo, and it was him and Trump, and they were problematic. And they were problematic in 2 ways. One was that in one of the meetings, he asked Comey to basically give a loyalty pledge. He kept saying, "Are you loyal? Are you loyal? I need you to be loyal." And Comey shrugged him off by saying, "I'm loyal to the truth," followed by like an awkward silence. And then Trump said, "You're doing a good job," and walked him out.
Captain America, I'm loyal to the truth. Right.
And then a second one was where
I'm only loyal to the dream.
Trump, the guy who authored a memo about torture. He's real loyal to the truth.
Speaking of that, I don't mean to interrupt you, but James Comey devolved into platitudes and saccharine, pro-American patriotism, halfway through, I guess.
Halfway through, yep. Shining city on the hill.
Shining city on the hill. The FBI has always told the truth. All of these things that are just goals faced. Right.
Yeah.
We talk about the same FBI. We talking about some.
It came out of nowhere, and it was again this sort of. We have to hold up these institutions. We have to make sure that we know that they're under assault by Trump, and that but for Trump, these institutions are great places, full of bipartisan, nonpartisan, not politicized. FBI is a not a political organization. All these bold-faced lies.
But it wasn't just him. It wasn't just him too. It was every single senator who asked a question did a 30 or 40-second preface with, the FBI is great. You're great. We all appreciate your service. And it's this guy, he authored a memo that justified torture. This is not a good dude. Don't sugarcoat this. But anyway, back to the next part that was problematic was there was a conversation that they had about Flynn, which we all read about in the New York Times and then in the Comey letter, where it was, "I hope you can let the Flynn investigation go." Now, throughout this, there was 2 big things that came out of this that I saw that made that seem less important. One was that at multiple points, Comey said that Trump did not pressure him to cancel the Russia investigation, and in fact encouraged it and said that it would be good to know if there are any satellites to his campaign that colluded with Russia, and he wanted to know that. And the second part was that Comey said
to Rubio, right? That was what he said to
Yeah.
Marco Rubio.
Yep. And the second part was that Comey said that the Flynn investigation was ancillary and separate from the Russia investigation. It only touched on the Russia investigation if they could have charged Flynn with something and got him to flip. And he used the words, if in the instance we can get someone to flip on something and give up further information, that would be the only way that impacted the Russia investigation. So
I'm sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was under the impression that the Flynn investigation was over now.
It is over now, but at the time of that conversation, it was not.
Okay, then I wasn't under. It's like that Flynn is no longer being investigated by the FBI.
No, that's not quite true. Flynn's collusion with Russia in part is done with, but I believe that there's still portions of the investigation involved with like his lobbying with Turkey and when and where he declared. That's still open.
I mean, the part that people attach to it, like it's called, like the sort of colloquial part that people think is open is not really open at this point.
Correct. And so, to me, this doesn't speak of obstruction of justice because at no point did he direct the FBI director to drop an investigation, which, by the way, Comey admitted was fully within the president's right and power. So at no point did he do that. And the closest that he came was, I hope. Now, Comey did say that he felt pressured to drop the investigation, but that he didn't do it. Comey also said that he felt no other pressure at any other time about the Flynn investigation except for that one conversation. So in order to make an obstruction case about Flynn, you would have to see what Coates and Rogers, or not they collaborated. And both of them in their testimony basically said, we felt pressure from Trump Asian and then completely clammed up and refused to go to a behind closed doors meeting, classified meeting. So, the fact that Mueller is involved in this will probably mean that they have a sit down with both of them. And that's probably a good thing. But I don't think that we're going to get to a collusion or an obstruction of justice from any of this. So what the Dems made this not to be, it's not going to happen. Comey did release some very interesting things about Clinton. And if you want to talk, I can go into that.
No. I mean, I think the most interesting thing about Comey releasing, I think Marco Rubio did it surprisingly. He got to a lot of interesting things under his questioning, right? Specifically, the fact that he was able to get Comey, or rather on the record, the fact that it seems like there were leaks for everything except the fact that Trump was not under investigation. Like people were leaking everything around this one key fact to make it seem as though he was, but he actually was not. And
correct.
Why? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and Trump, throughout the conversations with Comey and the numerous people questioning Comey said that what he really felt the most pressure on was the fact that the president kept asking him to say, "You're not under investigation."
I mean, for me, this whole thing comes across as theater, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that Comey is doing his best to make sure that the FBI is not defamed, to make sure that the GOP think twice about launching a smear campaign against him. But for me, what I hear is that, not what I hear, but what I feel is that this takes up a lot of people's political mind space. This takes up a good share of people's attention, because what else was going on today was Tom Price was speaking in front of another Senate committee, right? He was also in front of hearings to defend the health cuts to the Health and Human Services, specifically the 18% health cuts. 18% cuts under Trump's budget, quote unquote. The public health programs, the failure to get drug prices under control, the failures by a Trump administration to make supplement payments to the insurers for low-income Obamacare customers, and theoretically sabotaging Obamacare. These are things that really need to be addressed in the public. And it's not as though there aren't articles on it, right? There are articles on this everywhere, but when it comes down to what's being foregrounded, what's being put forth for public consumption, it's the most scandalous thing. People were tuning in all day, having yoga classes in LA to watch the Comey hearings. No, don't laugh. I saw pictures. They were having morning hot yoga while eating donuts and watching Comey. But for me, it's just there are actual other things going on, and you can't run in 2018 on Comey.
Right. And Dodd-Frank was basically repealed today. On top of that, McConnell pushed forward the ACHA. All of this stuff happened right while Comey was going on, and you do, like you Brandon said, you do see articles about it. But I'm sure that Rachel Maddow led off her show, or is going to lead off her show tonight, talking about the Comey testimony, and we'll probably spend greater than 50% of the show talking about it.
And misrepresenting it, right? Because people are already misrepresenting what he said. And it's just like they're already, selectively leaving out parts that absolve Trump, which, whether or not he deserves to be absolved. I think that, you could make the case that there isn't let's be honest. You could make an obstruction of justice case out of what Comey said, because you could make it out of pretty much everything. But like the people calling it this Watergate level out of their minds.
I think there's a couple things that we should touch on there. Is like, I guess first one is if Trump was if there's a modern equivalent to Watergate as far as just like literally the same things had transpired, do you think that would actually be enough to get him impeached? Do you think that today's Republican Party would impeach President Trump over what happened during Watergate? I'm not
Republican
so sure.
Party did it. Like Nixon's Republican Party wouldn't do it. So I don't know how this Republican Party would do it.
Exactly. So that's part of what I think. Quickly, that's part of what I've been seeing this whole thing is like the idea that he's going to get impeached it doesn't matter. It doesn't have any, like, whether he committed a crime is only tangentially related. In that,
there's the law and there's law use. But go ahead.
It's about whether it's a political reality. It's about whether there's a political reality, and there's not a political reality where Democrats win a majority of the Senate, get to 51, and then on top of that, find 15 Republican senators to sign on with impeaching their party's president. That's not a political. There's not a political reality in there, especially not on something as weak as an obstruction of justice charge. So it's been a waste of time for a long time, so long as that's been at all. As soon as the idea that like intense collusion between Russia and directly with Trump was out the window, so was any chance of him getting impeached.
Go ahead, Adair, if you have something to say, because if you don't, I'll
it's quite simple. I don't care.
Okay, we're gonna change the subject. We're gonna change the subject quickly. Into the second hour, but I will say some people are making the argument that Comey was obstructing justice. What he did with the leaking, right? What the way he chose to handle leaking his memos by giving it to a professor at Columbia.
Yep.
Constitutes obstruction of justice because it obviously had the political motives by his own statement of getting a special prosecutor appointed, right? A special investigator appointed to the case, and that could constitute obstruction of justice. Similarly, what he did with Loretta Lynch and the Clintons could also constitute. It could also constitute obstruction of justice. And you have some people. I guess the second most disingenuous argument. The second least disingenuous argument would be, okay, well, since everyone's doing it, no one should be brought up on charges. But obviously, the most genuine argument is that everyone should be brought up on charges. It seems like everyone needs to be brought up on charges.
Well, the thing with the Loretta Lynch was that was based on Comey's testimony today. It was clearly obstruction of justice, and it was done by Loretta Lynch. Like, that was one thing that I saw. Like, she directed him not to call it an investigation, because it would fit more in line with the campaign narrative.
She directed him to call it a quote unquote a matter, as though he were like a 17th century aristocrat. I'm sorry, as though the Clintons were 17th century aristocratic heirs to the throne who were caught killing prostitutes.
And they're parsing the language to the point where, from what I heard, was the one of the responses was that essentially that she said basically in a room full of people, so we're going to go forward calling this a matter. Everybody's all right with that, and nobody objected. And so like just like with Comey and whether the way that Trump was asking him was in fact him pressuring him and threatening his job, or whether it was just him hoping like he would hope for good things to happen. It's a parsing of language that only happens at this tier. It's like when you're poor or not powerful, they don't parse language this way. You're just guilty.
Right. And Comey did say that he pushed back a little on it. I forget his exact words, but he basically questioned calling it a matter to her, and he said that he did. And then she stood firm on we're calling it a matter.
People also question why he didn't push back on Trump when Trump was asking him these questions.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, I'm saying real quick.
He stopped his baby dookie.
Yeah, and also because Paul Ryan, forever the enabler, is like, well, maybe Trump didn't understand that if this wasn't order or request, it would be illegal. Illegal to do theoretically. And it's like, dude, calm down.
I just don't think. I think Trump is completely incompetent. So I don't think he had any concept that talking to his FBI director, he treats the FBI director like he's part of his staff rather than director of an agency that's supposed to be doing
I'm pretty sure Trump was under the understanding is like, I hire and fire this guy, he works for me, and so he does what I want him to do.
Yeah,
so that's how this works.
Let's get ready to move into the fun half of the show.
Okay.
Say your goodbyes to the live viewers for the time being, and we'll move into the fun half of the show with more cursing and I don't know, more nudity, but you won't see it because
it's audio.
Yeah, it's audio only.
I swear to God, if you get naked on camera again, Brandon.
Okay. So say your goodbyes to the live viewers.
John.
Okay, I'll go first. Goodbye, live viewers. Thank you guys for having me. It was really nice to be the white slave tonight. I appreciate it.
See, John knows what's up. Oh yeah, by the way, before I let you guys go, I just want to say thank you to the Benjamin Dixon Show channel for hosting us on this again lovely channel. And if you have the means and will and desire, you feel free to become a patron of the discourse. The link is at the bottom of the screen somewhere. Patreon.com/expand the discourse. Your contributions are always welcome. And if you do contribute, you can criticize me on Twitter and I'll have to listen to you. So finish up, guys.
That's worth it.
30 second piece.
Thanks for joining us tonight. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to hear more about what's going on at Evergreen and watch me make fun of racist people and occasionally yell at Brandon.
So take us out, Rich.
I want to thank everybody for watching. Make sure to subscribe. You can subscribe over on our channel as well. The link is in the description. And I suggest that you do follow Adair. He's got some great information regarding the Evergreen and what's going on at Evergreen. We also talked about it on the SoundCloud as well. So make sure to check that out and get some more information there. So with that, I think we are done.
Brandon still sucks.
Have a nice night, everybody. Make sure you listen to the second half of the show once it's posted, which will be tomorrow.
Yeah, and follow on the SoundCloud, because if you're not following there, you're going to miss out on a ton of great content. And we're giving it to you without having to be a patron.
SoundCloud.com/expanded discourse.
Yeah, get it.